Welcome to Tales by Felix, where every story unlocks a new world. Remember to subscribe, like and share. Let's begin. The morning sun spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Thorne estate, casting golden streaks across the sleek, modern kitchen. Eleanor Vance, her auburn hair pulled into a loose bun, stood at the counter, sketching a preliminary design for a new eco-friendly community center. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, rich and nutty, usually anchored her mornings in a comforting routine. But today, something felt off, like a note played slightly out of tune in a familiar melody. Her husband, Richard Thorne, CEO of Thorne Industries, was at the blender, preparing her daily smoothie, a vibrant concoction of kale, mango, and spirulina that he insisted was the elixir of health. Eleanor glanced up from her sketchpad, her architect's eye catching the precise, almost mechanical way Richard moved. His broad shoulders, usually relaxed under his tailored navy blazer, seemed tense, his fingers lingering over the blender a moment too long. He was meticulous, always had been, but this felt different, not the care of a devoted husband, but the calculated precision of a man with a secret. She watched as he added a dash of something from a small, unmarked jar. His back turned just enough to shield the action from her view. "Richard, what's that?" Eleanor asked, her tone light but probing, pencil pausing mid-stroke. He didn't turn, but his voice was smooth, practiced. "Just a new protein blend, darling. Supposed to boost immunity. You've been working too hard lately." He flashed her a smile, the kind that had charmed investors and boardrooms alike, but it didn't reach his eyes. Eleanor forced a smile in return, her mind snagging on the oddity. "You're too good to me," she said, but the words felt hollow. She returned to her sketch, but the seed of unease had been planted, its roots curling into her thoughts. Was it the pressure of his empire weighing on him, or was something darker shifting beneath the polished surface of their life? As the blender whirred, drowning out the morning's quiet, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that the foundation of their marriage, like a poorly designed building, was beginning to crack. Their conversation at the breakfast bar was stilted, the air thick with unspoken tension. "Big day at the office," she ventured, sipping her coffee, avoiding the smoothie for now. Richard's eyes flicked to the glass in front of her, then back to his tablet, where he scrolled through financial reports. "Always is. Merger talks are heating up. You know how it goes." His tone was casual, but there was a sharpness to it, like a blade hidden in silk. "Must be exhausting," Eleanor said, studying him. "You've been distracted lately." He looked up, his gaze locking onto hers, a flicker of something, irritation? Guilt? Crossing his face before he masked it with a chuckle. "You worry too much, Elle. Just focus on your designs. That community center's going to be your masterpiece, right?" She nodded, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying his movements, the jar, the tension. The smoothie sat untouched, its vibrant green hue almost mocking her growing suspicion. As Richard left for the office, his parting kiss felt perfunctory, and Eleanor stood alone in the kitchen, the silence amplifying her unease. Something was wrong, and she was determined to uncover what it was. The metallic tang hit Eleanor's tongue the moment she took a sip of the smoothie the next morning. It was subtle, barely noticeable beneath the tart sweetness of the mango, but it lingered, an unwelcome guest on her palate. She frowned, setting the glass down and staring at it as if it might reveal its secrets. Was it the new protein powder Richard had mentioned? A spoiled batch of berries? She'd been distracted lately, her mind consumed with blueprints and deadlines, but she wasn't imagining this. The taste was wrong. "Everything okay, darling?" Richard's voice cut through her thoughts. He leaned against the counter, his coffee mug in hand, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She hesitated, then forced a smile. "Just, tastes a bit off today. Maybe the kale's gone bad." His expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly, a shadow passing through them before he shrugged. "I'll check the batch tonight. Can't have my favorite architect feeling under the weather." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, but the gesture felt calculated, like a chess move. Eleanor nodded, her heart thudding. "Thanks, Richard." She pushed the glass away, her appetite gone. As he left for work, she poured the smoothie down the sink, watching the green liquid swirl away. The metallic aftertaste lingered, not just on her tongue but in her mind, whispering warnings she couldn't ignore. That evening, She cornered their housekeeper, Maria, in the laundry room. Maria had been with them for years, her warm, no-nonsense demeanor a constant in their household. "Maria, have you noticed anything strange about the groceries lately? The ingredients for my smoothies." Maria's brows furrowed, her hands pausing over a stack of linens. "Strange, Senora? No, everything comes from the same market. Senor Thorne is very particular about the brands." "Why do you ask?" Eleanor hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Just, the smoothie tasted odd this morning. Metallic, almost." Maria's eyes widened slightly, but she shook her head. "I haven't noticed anything, but I can check the pantry if you like. Maybe something's gone off." "Would you?" "I'd appreciate it," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the churn in her stomach. As Maria nodded and turned back to her work, Eleanor's mind raced. If the ingredients were fine, then what was causing the taste? And why was Richard so invested in her drinking it? That night, as Richard worked late in his study, Eleanor stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the blender. She poured a small amount of the leftover smoothie into a glass, swirling it under the light. Nothing looked unusual, but the faint metallic scent was unmistakable. She sealed the sample in a small container and hid it in the back of the fridge, her architect's instinct for precision now turning toward a different kind of investigation. The smoothie wasn't just a drink anymore, it was a puzzle, and Eleanor was determined to solve it. The headache started a week later, a dull throb behind Eleanor's eyes that pulsed with each heartbeat. At first, she attributed it to stress. Her firm was vying for a major contract, and the pressure was immense. But the pain escalated, a vice tightening around her skull, making it hard to focus on her designs. Then came the nausea, a queasy wave that struck without warning, turning her stomach at the thought of food. By the end of the week, a bone-deep fatigue settled in, dragging her limbs like lead weights. No amount of sleep could shake it. She sat in her doctor's office, the sterile white walls doing little to ease her growing paranoia. Dr. Patel, a kind-faced woman with a penchant for thoroughness, reviewed the test results with a frown. "Everything looks normal, Eleanor. Blood work, vitals, all within range. It could be stress. You've been burning the candle at both ends." Eleanor's fingers tightened around her purse. "This doesn't feel like stress, Dr. Patel. I know my body. Something's wrong." Dr. Patel leaned forward, her eyes softening. "I hear you. Let's try a few more tests, maybe check for heavy metal exposure or toxins. But in the meantime, rest. Delegate some of your work. You're not invincible." Eleanor nodded, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the metallic taste, Richard's guarded movements. As she left the office, a new symptom emerged. Her memory, once sharp enough to recall every detail of a complex blueprint, was slipping. Names, dates, even the layout of a project she'd worked on for months, they blurred like ink in water. She drove home in a fog, her thoughts spiraling. Was she sick, or was something, or someone, making her sick? That evening, she confronted Richard over dinner, her voice carefully neutral. "I saw Dr. Patel today. She thinks it might be stress, but I'm not so sure." Richard's fork paused mid-air, his eyes flicking to hers. "Stress can do awful things, Elle. You've been pushing yourself too hard. Maybe take a break from that community center project." She studied him, searching for a crack in his composure. "Maybe. But it's strange. I've never felt like this before. It's like my body's fighting something." He reached for her hand, his grip firm but not comforting. "You're overthinking it. Just drink your smoothies, get some rest. You'll be fine." His smile was too perfect, too rehearsed. Eleanor pulled her hand back, her pulse racing. "I think I'll skip the smoothie tomorrow, just to see if it helps." His smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. "Suit yourself," he said, his tone clipped. As he cleared the table, Eleanor's paranoia solidified into resolve. Whatever was happening, it started in the kitchen, and she was going to find out what. Richard's study was a fortress of order, its mahogany-paneled walls and polished bookshelves a testament to his obsessive need for control. Eleanor rarely ventured here, but that afternoon, searching for a misplaced blueprint, she found herself running her fingers along the shelves, hoping it had been tucked among his files. Her hand brushed a loose panel behind a row of outdated financial reports. Curiosity, sharp and insistent, pulled at her. She pressed the panel, and it clicked open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, nestled among dusty folders, was a small, unlabeled glass vial, no bigger than her thumb. Next to it lay a faded index card, covered in Richard's precise handwriting. Chemical symbols, as PB-SC, were scrawled alongside dosage instructions, measured in micrograms. Eleanor's breath caught, her college chemistry course flashing back. Arsenic. Lead. Scopolamine. The names hit like punches, each one carrying a weight of dread. This wasn't a hidden stash of whiskey or a forgotten keepsake. This was something sinister. She sank into Richard's leather chair, the vial cold in her hand. "What are you doing, Richard?" she whispered, her voice trembling in the silent room. The implications were horrifying, but she needed to be sure. She slipped the vial and card into her pocket, her heart hammering as she replaced the panel and left the study, every creak of the floorboards sounding like an alarm. That night, she waited until Richard was asleep, his soft snores filling their bedroom. In the dim glow of her laptop, she typed the chemical symbols into a secure browser, her fingers shaking. The results confirmed her worst fears. Scopolamine, a neurotoxin, could cause confusion, memory loss, and, in higher doses, far worse. Her symptoms, headaches, nausea, memory fog, aligned perfectly. The realization was a cold wave, washing away the last vestiges of trust. Richard wasn't just betraying her, he was poisoning her. Eleanor's hands trembled as she sat at her desk, the vial and card hidden in a locked drawer. The chemical confirmation was damning, but the photograph she'd found tucked in the same compartment was a gut punch. Richard, laughing, his arm around a stunning blonde with flawless skin and piercing blue eyes. Serena Dubois, his executive assistant. The name had floated through their social circles, always accompanied by a knowing smile or a whispered rumor. Dedicated colleague, they'd called her. Now, the word mistress screamed in Eleanor's mind. She stared at the photo, her anger mingling with a strange, cold clarity. "How long, Richard?" she murmured, tracing the edge of the image. The pieces were falling into place. The smoothies, the symptoms, the affair. He wasn't just cheating, he was trying to erase her, to clear the way for Serena. Eleanor needed more than suspicions. She called an old college friend, Clara, now a private investigator with a knack for discretion. They met at a quiet cafe, far from the prying eyes of their social circle. "Elle, you look like hell," Clara said, her bluntness softened by concern. She slid into the booth, her dark eyes scanning Eleanor's face. "What's going on?" Eleanor hesitated, then slid the vial and card across the table. "I found these in Richard's study. And this." She handed over the photo. Clara's expression hardened as she examined the items. "Scopolamine. Jesus. Eleanor. This isn't a game. If he's dosing you with this," she trailed off, her jaw tight. "And Serena Dubois? I've heard whispers about her. She's not just arm candy, she's ambitious. Dangerous." "I need proof," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "Something undeniable." Clara nodded, slipping the items into her bag. "I'll get you a nanny cam, top of the line. You set it up in the kitchen, catch him in the act. And I'll dig into Serena's background. If they're in this together, we'll find out." As Eleanor drove home, the weight of her discoveries pressed against her chest. The man she'd loved, the life they'd built, it was all a lie. But she wasn't a victim, not anymore. She was an architect, a builder of structures and solutions, and she would construct a plan to bring Richard's world crashing down. Eleanor's hands were steady, but her heart thundered like a storm trapped in her chest. The tiny nanny cam, a sleek black device no larger than a button, sat in her palm, its unassuming appearance belying its power to unravel her life. Clara, her private investigator friend, had delivered it that morning, along with a crash course in covert installation. "Point it at the blender, Elle," Clara had said, her voice low and urgent over coffee at the same discreet cafe. "Catch him in the act. One clear shot, and he's done." Now, in the quiet of the Thorne estate's kitchen, Eleanor worked with the precision of an architect plotting a blueprint. The decorative clock above the sink, with its intricate scrollwork, was the perfect hiding spot. She pried open its back, nestling the camera within the gears, its lens aimed directly at the smoothie station. Every tick of the clock seemed to echo her pulse as she tested the feed on her laptop, hidden in her upstairs office. The image was crisp, the gleaming granite counter, the blender, the neatly arranged fruit bowls. Her trap was set. The next morning, Eleanor played her part flawlessly, her face a mask of routine as she sipped coffee and sketched at the breakfast bar. Richard moved through his smoothie ritual with the same mechanical precision she'd come to dread. "Feeling better today, darling?" he asked, his tone warm but his eyes cold, scanning her for any sign of suspicion. "A little," Eleanor replied, her voice soft but deliberate. "Maybe I'll try the smoothie again tomorrow." She watched his reaction, a faint tightening of his jaw, a flicker of annoyance in his gaze. "Suit yourself," he said, too casually, as he reached into his jacket pocket. The movement was subtle, practiced, but the camera caught it all, a small vial, a quick tilt, a single dark drop dissolving into the vibrant green mixture. Eleanor's stomach churned, but she kept her expression neutral, her pencil moving across her sketchpad as if nothing was amiss. Richard poured the smoothie into her usual glass, his smile almost convincing as he set it before her. "For when you're ready," he said, then left for the office. Alone, Eleanor retrieved the camera's footage, her fingers trembling as she plugged the device into her laptop. The video played in stark clarity, Richard's deliberate act, the drop of poison, the careful stir. It was undeniable, a silent scream of betrayal captured in pixels. She saved the file to a secure drive, her resolve hardening like steel. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about turning Richard's own meticulous nature against him. That evening, she called Clara. "I've got it," Eleanor whispered, her voice tight with adrenaline. "Clear as day." Clara's response was immediate, fierce. "Good. Keep it safe, Elle. That's your ticket to justice. But be careful, he's not stupid. If he suspects you're onto him." "I know," Eleanor cut in, glancing at the locked door of her office. "I'm ready for the next step." The footage looped in Eleanor's mind, a relentless reel of Richard's treachery. Each frame fueled her anger, sharpening it into a blade of cold, calculating fury. Fear had no place here, it had been replaced by a singular focus, justice. Not just exposure, but a reckoning that would make Richard face the consequences of his own poison. She spent hours in her office, the door locked, sketching not buildings but a plan as intricate as any architectural design. Every detail had to be perfect, every angle considered. She began by altering her routine subtly, planting seeds of expectation. She drank half a smoothie one morning, feigning a sip to gauge Richard's reaction. His eyes lit up with a fleeting, triumphant glint, quickly masked by concern. "Feeling better, Elle?" he asked, his voice dripping with false warmth. "A bit," she lied, setting the glass down. "Maybe I'm getting used to it again." The lie was a lure, and he took it, his shoulders relaxing slightly. She was lulling him into complacency, ensuring he'd continue his ritual without suspicion. Her plan crystallized over late-night calls with Clara, who dug deeper into Serena Dubois's role. "She's not just his mistress," Clara reported, her voice crackling through the phone. "She's got her claws in the company, too. Emails, late-night meetings, access to accounts Eleanor doesn't even know about. If Richard's planning to replace you, Serena's his endgame." Eleanor's grip tightened on the phone. "Then she's part of this. I need to know how deep it goes." "I'm on it," Clara promised. "But whatever you're planning, make it airtight. Richard's slippery, and Serena's no innocent." Eleanor's strategy was psychological warfare, using Richard's own arrogance against him. She'd serve him a taste of his own poison, not literally, but metaphorically. She'd orchestrate a scenario where he'd witness its effects on someone he cared about, someone he thought he controlled. Serena. The idea was audacious, dangerous, but Eleanor thrived on precision. She'd make him watch his plan unravel, his confidence crumble. This was no longer about saving herself, it was about dismantling his empire, brick by poisoned brick. "Darling, Serena will be joining us for breakfast tomorrow," Richard announced over dinner, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. He speared a piece of salmon, his eyes avoiding Eleanor's. "Urgent business matters. You know how it is." Eleanor's fork paused mid-air, her heart lurching, not with fear, but with a thrill of opportunity. Fate had handed her the final piece of her puzzle, gift-wrapped in Richard's arrogance. Serena, The woman who'd infiltrated their marriage was walking straight into her trap. Eleanor's lips curved into a small, genuine smile, a stark contrast to the turmoil within. "Of course, dear. The more the merrier." Richard looked up, surprised by her warmth. "Really? I thought you'd... Well, you've been so tired lately." "I'm feeling better," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "In fact, let's make it special. I'll prepare something more elaborate than smoothies. A proper breakfast spread." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "It'll be nice to have company." His smile was tight, but he nodded. "Great. Serena will appreciate it." He returned to his meal, oblivious to the storm brewing in Eleanor's mind. She excused herself early, retreating to her office to refine her plan. Serena's presence was the catalyst she needed, a chance to turn Richard's weapon against his ally. The stage was set, the players assembled, and Eleanor, the silent architect of their downfall, felt a surge of anticipation. Tomorrow, the curtain would rise. She called Clara one last time. "Serena's coming to breakfast," she said, her voice low. "It's happening." Clara's response was a mix of caution and excitement. "You're sure about this, Elle? Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back." "I'm sure," Eleanor replied, her voice steady. "He's going to watch his world fall apart." The morning dawned crisp and deceptively serene, the Thorne estate bathed in soft light that belied the darkness about to unfold. Eleanor moved through the kitchen with quiet intensity, setting the table with an elegance reserved for rare occasions. Crystal glasses gleamed, fresh flowers bloomed in a centerpiece, and 3 identical smoothie glasses stood ready. She'd prepared the ingredients herself, ensuring every detail was under her control, except for the poison, which she knew Richard would provide. He entered the kitchen, his suit impeccable, his demeanor confident. "You've outdone yourself, Elle," he said, surveying the spread. "Serena will be impressed." "I hope so," Eleanor replied, her smile a perfect mask. She busied herself with a tray of pastries, watching him from the corner of her eye as he took over the blender. His movements were a familiar dance, the whir of the blades, the careful selection of fruits, and then, the moment she'd been waiting for. His hand slipped into his jacket pocket, producing the vial. A quick squeeze, a few dark drops, and a stir with an innocent flourish. He poured the smoothie into the glass he always set for Eleanor, his eyes flicking to her briefly, as if to ensure she wasn't watching. Eleanor's heart thrummed, a wild rhythm she fought to control. She waited until he turned to grab a coffee mug, then moved with the speed and precision of a seasoned architect. Her fingers, steady despite the adrenaline, swapped the poisoned glass with the one at Serena's place setting. The switch was seamless, a silent sleight of hand perfected in her mind over sleepless nights. She stepped back, her face serene, as Richard returned to the counter. "Ready when you are," she said, gesturing to the table. Her voice was calm, but inside, she was a coiled spring, waiting for the moment to unleash. Serena Dubois arrived at precisely 8 a.m., her heels clicking on the marble floor like a metronome. She radiated corporate polish, her blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon, her tailored dress hugging her frame. But there was a casual intimacy in the way she greeted Richard, a lingering touch on his arm, a smile too warm for a mere colleague. Eleanor's stomach churned, but she kept her composure, welcoming Serena with a practiced warmth. "Serena, so good to see you," Eleanor said, gesturing to the table. "Help yourself. I hear you're a fan of my smoothies." Serena's smile was dazzling, but her eyes held a calculating edge. "Richard's told me all about them. Can't wait to try one." She reached for the glass Eleanor had positioned, the poisoned one, and took a large, confident sip. Richard watched, his expression a mix of satisfaction and anticipation, oblivious to the switch. Eleanor sat across from them, her hands folded in her lap, her face a mask of polite interest. The moment stretched, a tableau of quiet dread. Serena chatted about a new merger, her voice bright, but Eleanor's focus was on the subtle signs. A slight frown creased Serena's brow. She set the glass down, her fingers lingering on it. Then, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "Something wrong?" Richard asked, his tone light but his gaze sharp. Serena shook her head, but her hand pressed against her temple. "Just a bit dizzy. Must be the early morning." She took another sip, and Eleanor's heart skipped. The toxin was working, faster than she'd expected. Serena's face paled, her manicured nails digging into the tablecloth. A sharp gasp escaped her lips, and her body stiffened, trembling violently. "Serena!" Richard's voice rose, his chair scraping back. "What's happening?" Eleanor stood, her voice calm but authoritative. "Call an ambulance, Richard." "No." He fumbled for his phone, his face a mask of confusion morphing into horror as Serena's eyes rolled back, her body collapsing to the floor. The glass shattered, green liquid spreading like a stain across the marble. Eleanor watched, her expression unreadable, as Richard's world began to unravel, his triumph replaced by the dawning realization that his plan had gone terribly, fatally wrong. The kitchen, moments ago a stage for Eleanor's meticulously orchestrated trap, now pulsed with chaos. Serena Dubois lay crumpled on the marble floor, her blonde hair fanned out like a halo, her body twitching in violent spasms. The shattered smoothie glass bled green across the pristine tiles, a grotesque mirror of the poison's insidious work. Richard stood frozen, his phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip, his face a kaleidoscope of shock and dawning horror. "Serena!" he shouted, dropping to his knees beside her, his voice cracking. "Stay with me!" Eleanor moved with deliberate calm, her architect's precision guiding her actions. She dialed 911, her voice steady as she relayed the emergency. "My husband's assistant collapsed after drinking a smoothie. She's seizing, please hurry." She gave the address, her tone urgent but controlled, every word chosen to avoid suspicion. As she hung up, she caught Richard's gaze, his eyes wild with panic. "What did you do, Eleanor?" he hissed, his voice low, accusing. "Me?" She tilted her head, her expression one of feigned confusion. "I just served breakfast, Richard. You made the smoothies." Her words were a dart, piercing his composure, and she saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. He opened his mouth to retort, but the wail of sirens cut him off, growing louder as the ambulance approached. Paramedics burst through the door, their boots tracking dirt across the marble. They swarmed Serena, checking her vitals, barking questions. "What did she ingest?" a medic demanded, his gloved hand stabilizing Serena's head. "A smoothie," Eleanor answered, her voice clear. "Kale, mango, spirulina, our usual recipe." She paused, then added, "She started feeling dizzy right after drinking it." Her words were careful, planting seeds of suspicion without accusing outright. Richard hovered nearby, his face a mask of concern, but Eleanor caught the subtle tremors in his hands, the sweat beading on his brow. He was trying to control the narrative, but the cracks were showing. As the medics loaded Serena onto a stretcher, Richard grabbed Eleanor's arm, his grip bruising. "We need to talk," he whispered, his voice a low growl. "Now." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Later, darling. Serena needs you now." She pulled free, her tone icy, and followed the medics outside, leaving Richard to trail behind, his world unraveling with every step. The ambulance ride was a blur of flashing lights and clinical efficiency. Eleanor sat in the waiting area of St. Mary's Hospital, the antiseptic smell stinging her nose. Richard paced nearby, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low as he spoke to his lawyer. "It's a misunderstanding," he insisted, his tone strained. "She must have had a reaction to something." He glanced at Eleanor, his eyes narrowing, but she kept her gaze fixed on a magazine, her face a mask of calculated neutrality. Inside, she was a storm of adrenaline and resolve. The footage from the nanny cam burned in her mind, a silent weapon waiting to be unleashed. She'd slipped the USB drive into her purse before leaving the house, its weight a comforting anchor. Richard thought he could charm his way out of this, but she was ready to dismantle his lies. A doctor emerged, her face grim. "Ms. Dubois is stable, but it was close. We're running a toxicology screen. She's showing signs of neurotoxin exposure, scopolamine, possibly. Any idea how she might have ingested it?" Richard's face paled, but he recovered quickly, his voice smooth. "No idea, doctor. Maybe something in the smoothie ingredients?" "Eleanor, you checked the produce, right?" Eleanor's heart skipped, but she kept her composure. "Everything was fresh, Richard. You know I'm careful." She turned to the doctor, her voice soft but deliberate. "She only drank the smoothie you made, Richard. Nothing else." The doctor's eyes flicked between them, sensing the undercurrent. "We'll know more soon. The police may want to speak with you." She left, and Richard's facade cracked, his jaw tightening. "What are you playing at, Eleanor?" he hissed, stepping closer. "You're trying to pin this on me." She met his gaze, her voice low and steady. "I'm not playing, Richard. I'm just telling the truth." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken accusations, as a uniformed officer approached, signaling the next phase of Eleanor's plan. Detective Harding was a force of nature, her piercing eyes cutting through the hospital waiting room's sterile haze. She introduced herself with a firm handshake, her notebook already open. "Mrs. Vance, Mr. Thorne, I need to understand what happened. Ms. Dubois's condition suggests deliberate poisoning. Let's start with the smoothie." Eleanor recounted the morning with meticulous detail, her voice calm but laced with concern. "Richard made the smoothies, as he always does. Serena drank hers and collapsed within minutes. I'm as shocked as anyone." She glanced at Richard, who was fidgeting, his charm faltering under Harding's scrutiny. "Mr. Thorne," Harding prompted, her pen poised. "It's like Eleanor said," he replied, his voice smooth but strained. "I used the usual ingredients. Maybe something was contaminated. I'd never hurt Serena, she's a valued colleague." Harding's eyes narrowed, but she nodded, jotting notes. "We'll need to test everything in your kitchen. Ms. Dubois is awake now. She's asking to speak with you, Mrs. Vance." Eleanor's pulse quickened, but she nodded, following Harding to Serena's room. The woman lay propped up in bed, her face pale, her eyes haunted. Tubes snaked from her arm, and her hands trembled as she clutched the blanket. "Eleanor," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Eleanor sat beside her, her expression soft but probing. "Know what, Serena?" Tears spilled down Serena's cheeks, her voice barely audible. "Richard, he's been poisoning you. The smoothies, the symptoms you told me about, headaches, nausea. I thought he was just stressed, controlling. But he told me last week he wanted you gone. Not divorced, gone." She choked on a sob. "I didn't realize he'd. I drank the wrong one, didn't I?" Eleanor's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "You're safe now, Serena. Just tell the truth." She glanced at Harding, who was scribbling furiously, her face grim. Serena's confession poured out, a torrent of guilt and fear. She admitted to the affair, to Richard's promises of a future together, to his subtle manipulations. "He said you were unstable, that you'd ruin the company. I believed him, until today." Harding stepped forward, her voice firm. "Ms. Dubois, are you saying Mr. Thorne deliberately poisoned the smoothie meant for his wife?" Serena nodded, her eyes squeezing shut. "Yes." "I'm so sorry, Eleanor." Eleanor's hand rested lightly on Serena's, a gesture of calculated compassion. Inside, she felt a cold satisfaction. The trap had sprung, and Richard's lies were unraveling faster than he could spin them. The hospital hallway was a stark contrast to the chaos of Serena's room, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on Richard's face as he cornered Eleanor. His charm was gone, replaced by raw, desperate fury. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he hissed, his voice low to avoid the attention of a passing nurse. "Whatever you're doing, Eleanor, you'll regret it. I'll make sure you lose everything. Your firm, your reputation, everything." Eleanor stood her ground, her eyes locked on his. The man who'd once intimidated her now seemed small, a cornered animal baring its teeth. "You've already lost, Richard," she said, her voice calm but cutting. "You thought you could erase me, but I'm still here. And I have nothing left to lose." His face twisted, a flash of something dangerous in his eyes. "You don't know what I'm capable of," he spat, stepping closer. She didn't flinch. "Oh, I do. I've seen the vial, Richard. I know about the scopolamine. And soon, everyone else will too." Her words were a blade, and she saw them strike home, his bravado crumbling into panic. He grabbed her wrist, but she yanked free, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Touch me again, and you'll regret it more than you already do." She turned and walked away, leaving him trembling in the hallway, his empire of lies collapsing around him. Back in the waiting room, Eleanor sat, her mind racing. Richard's desperation was a sign he knew the walls were closing in. She needed to act quickly, before he could regroup. Clara's latest report, texted during the ambulance ride, confirmed Serena's involvement in Thorne Industries' shady financial dealings, offshore accounts, falsified reports. Richard had built a house of cards, and Eleanor was ready to pull the final card. She called Clara from a quiet corner. "He's unraveling," she said, her voice low. Serena confessed everything. "I'm ready to hand over the footage." Clara's voice was grim but triumphant. "Do it, Elle. But be ready, he's got powerful friends. This won't end quietly." "I'm counting on it," Eleanor replied, her fingers brushing the USB drive in her purse. The weight of it felt like justice itself. Detective Harding's office was a cramped, cluttered space, but her presence filled it with authority. She'd spent hours questioning Richard and Serena, her instincts sharpened by years of unraveling lies. Now, she sat across from Eleanor, her piercing eyes softening slightly. "Mrs. Vance, you've been remarkably calm through all this. Most people would be a wreck." Eleanor offered a small, measured smile. "I'm an architect, detective. I'm used to handling pressure." She reached into her purse, producing the USB drive. "I believe this will answer some of your questions." Harding's brow arched, but she took the drive, plugging it into her laptop. The screen flickered to life, revealing the kitchen footage, Richard's deliberate movements, the vial, the dark drop dissolving into the smoothie. The timestamp was clear, the evidence irrefutable. Harding leaned back, her face etched with grim astonishment. This is damning. How long have you had this?" "Long enough," Eleanor said, her voice steady. "I suspected something was wrong weeks ago. The symptoms, the taste in the smoothies, it all added up. I needed proof." Harding nodded, her respect evident. "You've got it. This changes everything." She paused, studying Eleanor. "You switched the glasses, didn't you? That's why Serena drank the poison." Eleanor's expression didn't waver. "I served breakfast, detective." Richard poured the smoothies. "If the glasses got mixed up, that's on him." Her words were a careful sidestep, truthful enough to avoid perjury but vague enough to protect her. Harding's eyes lingered, but she didn't press. "I'll need to take this into evidence," Harding said, ejecting the drive. "And we'll need to search your home. If there's more, like that vial you mentioned, it'll seal his fate." Eleanor nodded, her heart steady. "You'll find everything you need in his study. Behind the bookshelf, there's a loose panel." She stood, her posture straight, her mission clear. The unseen hand of her planning had delivered the final blow, and Richard's carefully crafted world was about to collapse under the weight of his own deceit. As she left the office, Eleanor felt a strange lightness. The fear that had haunted her for weeks was gone, replaced by a quiet, unyielding strength. Richard had underestimated her, but she was no longer his victim. She was the architect of his downfall, and the blueprint was flawless. Detective Harding's office was a hive of activity, papers strewn across her desk, her laptop screen glowing with the damning kitchen footage. The image of Richard Thorne, CEO of Thorne Industries, adding a lethal drop to the smoothie was seared into her mind. But Harding's instincts, honed by years of unraveling complex cases, told her this was more than a domestic betrayal. The precision of Richard's actions, the hidden vial, the scopolamine, it all hinted at a pattern, a darkness that extended beyond Eleanor's near tragedy. Harding leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing as she reviewed old case files. "Thorne's too clean," she muttered to her partner, Officer Ruiz, who was sipping coffee across the room. "No one's this perfect without skeletons." Ruiz nodded, flipping through a stack of financial reports. "Look at this. 3 executives at Thorne Industries left suddenly over the past 5 years. One disappeared, another had a car accident, and the third checked into a psych ward. Coincidence?" "Not likely," Harding replied, her voice grim. She pulled up a cold case. Jonathan Marks, a former business partner of Richard's who'd vanished after questioning Thorne Industries' accounting practices. Rumors of offshore accounts and falsified profits had swirled, but no evidence ever surfaced. Until now. Eleanor's footage was the key to unlocking Richard's past, and Harding was determined to follow the trail. She called Eleanor, who answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Vance, we're searching your home today." That panel you mentioned. Anything else we should know about? Eleanor's voice was steady, precise. Check his safe, detective. Behind the portrait in his study. Combination is December 27th, 94. Our anniversary, ironically. You might find more than financial records. Harding's pen paused. You've been thorough. I had to be, Eleanor said, a hint of steel in her tone. He's been thorough too. The search yielded a jackpot. The vial, more index cards with chemical notations, and encrypted USB drive in the safe. A forensic tech cracked it, revealing emails between Richard and a shadowy contact discussing disposal of obstacles, business rivals, whistleblowers, and, chillingly, Eleanor. Harding's gut twisted. This guy's not just a husband with a mistress, she told Ruiz. He's a predator. She confronted Richard at the station, where he sat in an interrogation room, his tailored suit rumpled, his charm fraying. Care to explain these? Harding slid printouts of the emails across the table. Richard's eyes flicked over them, his jaw tightening. Fabricated. Someone's setting me up. Probably Eleanor. She's been unstable, you know. Harding leaned forward, her voice cold. Unstable. Or inconvenient. We've got your handwriting on those cards, your face on the footage, and now these emails. Want to try again? Richard's composure cracked, his fingers drumming the table. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The company, the mergers, it's cutthroat. I made choices to protect what's mine. Including poisoning your wife? Harding snapped. He flinched, his silence louder than any denial. Harding stood, her voice final. You're not charming your way out of this, Thorne. We're just getting started. The news of Richard's arrest hit like a tsunami, flooding media outlets and social circles. Helicopters buzzed over the Thorne estate, cameras flashing as reporters clamored for a glimpse of the fallen CEO. Posts on X exploded with speculation, old rumors resurfacing. Always knew Thorne was shady, one user wrote. Those accidents at his company? Not accidents. Another posted a grainy photo of Richard with a mysterious figure at a gala, captioned, Who's this guy? Follow the money. The public outcry stirred ghosts from Richard's past. A former executive assistant, Karen Holt, watched a news report about Serena's poisoning and felt a chill. Years ago, she'd worked for Richard, witnessing his ruthless tactics. She'd kept silent, haunted by his threats, but now her fear gave way to courage. She called Harding, her voice trembling. I worked for Thorne in 2018. There was an intern, bright kid, who found discrepancies in the books. Richard, he destroyed her. Spread rumors, gaslit her until she had a breakdown. She's still in therapy. Harding's pen flew across her notebook. Did you see anything else? Meetings, documents. Karen hesitated, then whispered, late-night meetings with a man named Victor. Envelopes exchanged, no names on them. I overheard Richard say, no loose ends. I quit the next week. Another witness emerged, a former security guard at Thorne Industries, now retired, who'd seen Richard with the same shadowy figure, Victor, in a parking garage. Thorne handed him a bag, the guard told Harding. Looked like cash. The guy drove off in a black SUV, no plates. Harding cross-referenced the leads, her instincts screaming. Victor was a known fixer in corporate circles, tied to untraceable accidents. She pulled up Jonathan Marks's file again. His car had been found in a river, his body never recovered. The pieces were forming a mosaic of Richard's ruthlessness, a man who'd built an empire on manipulation and murder. Eleanor, watching the news from her temporary hotel room, felt a strange mix of vindication and dread. She called Clara, her voice low. They're digging into his past. It's bigger than I thought. Clara's response was grim. Yeah, I found more on X. Old colleagues are talking. Richard's been dodging accountability for years. But you've opened the floodgates, Elle. Be ready for the fallout. I am, Eleanor said, her fingers tracing the edge of her laptop. The past was catching up to Richard, and she was the catalyst. The Thorne estate was a circus of flashing lights and shouting reporters as Harding arrived with a warrant. She strode through the grand foyer, her boots echoing on the marble, and found Richard in his study, his phone pressed to his ear. Fix this now, he barked to his lawyer, his face pale, his hair disheveled. He froze when he saw Harding, the warrant in her hand like a guillotine. "Richard Thorne," she said, her voice cutting through the silence, "you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Serena Dubois and Eleanor Vance, along with charges of conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice." She listed the counts, each one a hammer blow, as officers cuffed him. Richard's eyes darted to Eleanor, who stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You did this," he spat, his voice venomous. "You'll pay for this, Eleanor." She met his gaze, her voice calm but piercing. "You paid first, Richard. Every drop of poison, every lie, it's all coming back to you." The click of the handcuffs was a symphony, resonating with the finality of her victory. As officers led him out, reporters swarmed, their questions a cacophony. "Mr. Thorne, did you poison your wife? What about the missing partner?" Richard's head bowed, his silence damning. Eleanor watched from the steps, her heart steady. The media frenzy was a storm, but she was its eye, calm and resolute. Harding approached her, her voice low. "We found enough in the safe to tie him to Marx's disappearance. You were right about the combination. You've got a hell of a memory." Eleanor's lips twitched. "I'm an architect, detective. Details are my life." Harding nodded, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. "You're one tough woman, Mrs. Vance. We'll need you to testify." "I'll be there," Eleanor said, her voice unwavering. As Harding left, Eleanor turned back to the empty house, its grandeur now a hollow shell. The arrest was just the beginning. The trial would be her final blueprint. Eleanor moved into a sunlit loft in the city, leaving the Thorne estate behind like a discarded blueprint. The space was small but hers, filled with her sketches, plants, and the promise of a new start. The nightmares that had plagued her, Richard's face, the metallic tang of poison, began to fade, replaced by the quiet rhythm of healing. She threw herself into her architecture firm, her designs bolder, more innovative, as if the trauma had unlocked a deeper creativity. Therapy helped, too. Dr. Lena Carter, a soft-spoken woman with a knack for cutting through emotional fog, guided Eleanor through the layers of betrayal. "You didn't just survive, Eleanor," Lena said in one session, her eyes warm. "You rebuilt yourself. That's rare." Eleanor traced the edge of her coffee mug, her voice soft. "I had to. He took everything else, my trust, my peace. I wasn't going to let him take me." Lena nodded. "And now? What do you want?" Eleanor smiled, a real one this time. "To create. To live. To be Eleanor Vance, not Richard Thorne's wife." She reconnected with old friends, her laughter returning like a forgotten melody. At a gallery opening, she met Clara, who hugged her fiercely. "You look alive again, Elle," Clara said, her eyes shining. "I'm proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without you," Eleanor replied, squeezing her hand. "You gave me the tools." Clara grinned. "You built the house. I just handed you the hammer." The loft became Eleanor's sanctuary, each corner a testament to her resilience. She framed a sketch of her community center project, a symbol of her reclaimed future. The past still lingered, but it no longer defined her. She was no longer a victim. She was an architect of her own destiny, brick by resilient brick. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, packed with reporters, spectators, and the weight of Richard's crimes. Eleanor sat in the witness stand, her voice clear and unwavering as she recounted the months of suspicion, the metallic taste, the hidden vial. She presented the nanny cam footage, the screen displaying Richard's chilling act to a hushed room. Gasps rippled through the gallery as the jury watched, their faces grim. Serena testified next, her voice fragile but resolute. "He told me Eleanor was a liability," she said, tears streaming. "I didn't know he meant to kill her until I drank the smoothie. I was just a pawn." Her words were a dagger, cutting through Richard's last defenses. The prosecution called Karen Holt and the security guard, their testimonies painting a portrait of a man driven by greed and control. Emails, financial records, and the safe's contents tied Richard to Jonathan Marks's disappearance and a web of corporate sabotage. Harding's meticulous work laid it bare. Richard Thorne was a monster in a tailored suit. Richard's defense was a desperate scramble, his lawyer claiming Eleanor had framed him, that the footage was doctored. But the evidence was overwhelming, The jury's deliberation brief. The foreman stood, his voice steady. We find the defendant guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. The judge's sentence was a litany of years, ensuring Richard would spend decades behind bars. He slumped in his chair, his once imposing frame diminished, his eyes avoiding Eleanor's. She watched, not with triumph but with a profound sense of closure. Justice had been served, cold and unyielding, a structure built on truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Eleanor slipped away, her steps light. Clara met her at a nearby cafe, raising a glass. "To you, Elle. You took him down." Eleanor clinked her glass, her smile quiet but genuine. "To starting over." As she walked home, the city lights glittering around her, Eleanor felt the weight of the past lift. Richard's empire was rubble, but her future was a blank blueprint, ready for her to design. She was free, and the world was hers to build anew. The end.